The one working on the 252 stroke engine. It didn't look too hot.
Crank seal was popped out, so made it run lean. Crank bearings have seen better days.
I never cracked into it, forgot I even had it. This is definitely the oldest bike I own. I rode this thing a couple of times. I'm gonna tear this thing down today and we're gonna start the build process on the 73 Elsinore. This bike is beating me up. My air filter, probably the same air filter that came in this bike in 73. Front end is seized. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. It's been a pretty hectic week for me. Our baby finally came this week. Thanks to those of you who reached out to me and my wife with comments and messages and all that stuff. We couldn't be happier, couldn't be more excited. It's wild, it's crazy. Definitely anybody that has a kid knows that it's definitely a crazy feeling, crazy experience, but we're super excited. In this week's video, I am headed to Steve's house, who we featured in the last video. He's the one working on the 252 stroke engine. So we're gonna go check in with him, get some updates, kind of see what that thing looked like as soon as it was torn apart. And the pictures that I received, it didn't look too hot. So I'm glad we dropped it off with him. There are a couple other upgrades I'm gonna be making to the bike while it's apart. So excited to get that thing back on the track. Excited to take you guys along with me when I do finally get it back on the track. Then after that, we're gonna head over to the shop. There's a bike that I have just forgotten about. I don't know why I forgot about it. It's probably one of the most iconic bikes that I own. So we're gonna start the disassembly process on that bike. It's definitely a little bit like a different build than I've done in the past, but the end result should be probably one of the coolest bikes I've ever swung a leg over. I've already ridden it before, but we're gonna tear it down, get it running right, get it all proper. We're pulling up to Steve's here in just a second. We'll get some updates on this 252 stroke engine, and then we'll head over to the shop. All right, guys, we're here back with Steve. He has the engine completely disassembled. It's kind of worse than we thought, so. You wanna touch on some of the stuff that you found when you took it apart?
Yeah, so starting with the power valves on the cylinder, those were bad, misaligned, and loose. They never would have opened up. That's pretty simple to fix, so that's right there. Found out the left crank seal was popped out, so made it run lean, and you can see they're seized right there. Didn't really damage the cylinder, so we're good with that. Got in, started to pull the bottom end apart, and the clutch, I don't know if the clutch oil had ever been changed, training oil. The clutch is pretty fried. You can feel definitely grooves here. Clutch basket is got some ribs and notching right here. I want to replace that, or at least clean that up a little bit. And then you can hear these crank bearings. Crank bearings have seen better days. So probably stock, and then we'll go ahead and do the rod with that too.
Well, I think it's in good hands, and I especially know that because we have a mutual friend, Lars Lindstrom, over at Factory Honda, team manager, and he texted me on the side and was like, hey, bike's in great hands. It's gonna run awesome when it's done. Might be a little longer than we expected, but is what it is. This thing's gonna be ripping when we get back together, so I'm excited. Thank you.
Hey, no problem.
All right, guys, we're back at the shop. So thankful for Steve for A, taking the time to do it, and B, letting me drop in whenever I need to update you guys, update myself, and explain what's going on with that bike. But like I mentioned earlier, I've had this bike for a long time now. I never cracked into it. Honestly, at this point, I forgot I even had it until I was on Instagram and I saw, you know, Mammoth Motocross is putting on their event around this time of year. And I've always wanted to go up there and do that, kind of just show up and do some vintage racing. And it always sounded really fun to me. So I actually bought this bike exactly for that purpose. I just never got around to it. That bike is the 73 250 Elsinore. This bike is extremely iconic. I think it's one of the bikes that kind of just put Honda on the map. One of the most fun bikes I've ridden too. Like, it's crazy how much fun you can have with such little travel, and in its current state, such little power. I rode this thing a couple of times. Had a blast on it, was anxious to tear it down, and honestly with like moving to Idaho, moving back, all that stuff, I just kind of forgot I even had it. It is not in the best shape. Tank needs some love, pipe, engine needs to be gone through, definitely the carburetor. I'm gonna tear this thing down today and we're gonna start the build process on the 73 Elsinore, a bike that I am extremely excited to get going. So I hope you guys enjoy this one. Don't know how long this is gonna take. I've never done a vintage bike before, but it seems like the older bikes take a little bit more time. This is definitely the oldest bike I own, so I assume it's gonna take even longer to build, trying to source the right parts, find the right people to put it together. But I do have some really good ideas for this thing. I know that a lot of people get gussets for the frame, so I want to do that. And in the process, I kind of want to strip it down and do the frame kind of like how I did the gas slash KTM with this raw look. I think that'll look really cool. Have some ideas for some colorways and all that kind of stuff. First things first, we got to get this thing torn apart and kind of just sift through the parts that we're going to keep, the parts that we're going to refurbish, the parts that we're going to need to source new ones for. It's going to be a long list and it's going to be quite a bit of time. Like I said before, very excited to get this thing kind of under the knife, get it torn apart, and then bring you guys along on the resurrection of the 73 250 Elsinore. I'm gonna go ahead and set this thing up on a tripod, start the teardown process. I'll update you guys as I go, what parts look good, what parts don't. First things first, before we get it torn apart, do you need to take off the pipe? If I can get this thing refurbished, I definitely want to, because it looks like it's pretty sweet, old school looking pipe. In order to get it on a stand, it goes below the frame. So I'm gonna go ahead and take that off, get it on the stand, and then we can secure it to the stand and start disassembling this bike. think it's ever taken me that long to take just 2 wheels off. This thing's beating me up. I'm already sweating. It's like an oversized 110 with like the drum brake. Trying to keep my stuff organized too, so when it's time to put this together, again, I kind of know where everything's at. Wheels are off. I don't really know where to start on these things. As you guys probably saw, the bike's super unbalanced, not happy on the stand. I got a tight on there holding on, but just trying to stay organized, because I know like with these older builds, it just takes a lot more time to get parts, and there's so many more parts that you need rather than just taking apart a brand new bike and putting it back together. It's a lot more simple. These take a lot more attention to detail, a lot more time and effort. It's well worth it in the end. Obviously, we kind of saw it with this bike. Turned out awesome, but this bike's 20 years older, so having a little bit tougher of a time. I think next, I'm gonna pull the seat off and the tank off and kind of see where to go from there. I would like to get the rear end off and then the front end off and then pull the engine out, but I don't really know the order of operations on these bikes. I'm sure there's gonna be a vintage guy in the comments somewhere telling me I did something wrong, but doing my best. I'm not a mechanic, I just ride the things. I do love working on them, do love building, love customizing them. I think the end goal and the end result with this bike is gonna be awesome. I'm gonna start taking off the top portion, work back to the rear end and the front end, and then hopefully get the engine out. I'm gonna organize all the parts and kind of go through with you guys what I'm gonna get like re-powder coated, what's gonna need replacing. So hopefully we'll have that by the end of this video of kind of a good rough idea of what this bike's gonna be when it's finished. I can't remember if I mentioned this earlier, but once this bike is done, I really wanna go after like a 1980s Honda, because then I would have a 73, and then I would have an 80s, and then a 90s, and then a 2000s, 2010s, which I don't know how long I'll have that thing, but we'll replace it if we need to, and then a 2020. So I could have like 6 generations of Honda in the shop, and I think that'd be really cool. Anyways, getting sidetracked. 1973 Honda Elsinore 250. Let's get this thing apart and get this thing rolling. Rear end is off the bike. This bike is beating me up. Probably one of the most difficult bikes to take apart. Not because it's overcomplicated or anything like that. It's very simple. It's just all the bolts are very, very old. Lots of rust, lots of grit and grime. My air filter, probably the same air filter that came in this bike in 73. Seen better days. As I'm kind of going through this bike, I'm interested to know like what you guys know about vintage bike. If you have any leads on like any parts, like plastics, hardware, anything, like all those little bits and pieces that kind of like complete this thing and not make it so like crusty when I put it back together. I'm gonna do my best to clean up as many parts as I can. You guys know where to get plastic, like I said, hardware. I'm sure there's stuff that I'm missing. The tank, obviously, if I could find one, I'll probably pick it up, but I do know that parts for these bikes are hard to come by, so I'll do my best to restore everything I can. If you got any help, let me know. I think we're gonna continue on with taking the front end off and then the engine. I know there's a lot of gusset kits for these bikes, for these vintage bikes. If you know of any that like you would recommend, ones to stay away from, please comment below, let me know. Continuing what I was saying, this will be pretty much ready for gussets, and then we can get it off the powder coat, get it raw, and hopefully the engine won't take too long. I know they're pretty simple, but again, it's one of those things where such an old bike, really hard to come across parts. One thing I was really worried about, it doesn't even go through the motor. Like I'm used to the swing arm pivot going through the motor. On this bike, when I was removing it, it was completely seized inside the engine. It took me like 4 hours of torching it and trying to get WD-40 in it and getting it out, but I finally just ended up taking it over to Moto Whipped. Luckily it came right out. That's one less thing I gotta worry about. Let's continue on. So front end is seized. I don't know if you can see how much rust is in there, so I'm gonna have to take this apart another time. I'm just really anxious to get the engine out and kind of have this down to a bare frame other than the front clamp. So that'll stay for now. I'll take that off camera. We're gonna go ahead and pull the little air box thing out, the carburetor, and then get the engine out. And that was really my goal. I just wanted to get this as framed as I possibly could by the end of this video, kind of give you guys an insight on what's to come with this bike. But yeah, this just does not want to come off the front end. I've like tried a hammer, tried vice grip, nothing's getting that thing to budge. So I might have to like soak it in some WD-40, leave it overnight, come back tomorrow and do it then. Moving on, airbox, carburetor, engine. Let's get this thing out. All right guys, engine is officially out. We got a long road ahead of us with this bike. Please be patient with it. I have to take this engine and the carburetor down to some guys that I know that are avid vintage guys. I think that's important because this isn't any typical engine and carburetor and all that setup. It's a niche little thing that I feel like the vintage community sticks together really well. But if you guys know anybody that is also in the vintage community that has parts, has any type of connections, obviously this thing needs a lot of love. Basically what I'm gonna be able to do is take the frame, get it gusseted, powder coated, as well as the swing arm, a few little parts like that, hard parts and stuff like that. But I'd like a new fender. That one's like spray painted silver, number plate. I would love a new gas tank. If you know anybody that restores gas tanks for these things, please let me know. Drop in the comments and I'll definitely look into that. We got a long road for this thing. I mean, it is what it is. I bought a very old bike for a very good price. It ran at the time, but it never ran very good, and it only lasted for about 2 rides. So it was always my end goal to race this thing at Mammoth. That's my goal with this, is to get this ready for Mammoth next year. I would like to hit a couple races before that with the bike to shake it down, make sure that everything's running good. But I think I'm gonna close it out here. I will keep you updated with this bike as well as the 250. Thank you guys for tuning in. As always, like, comment, subscribe, give the videos a thumbs up, and we will see you in the next one later on.